everyone. I think we are live. So very happy to be here. We are a little bit, let's say, on a surprised because our dear Stephen is in the background, but has probably another meeting currently still for his work. So let's hope it will finish soon and he can join us as soon as possible. So hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us. And today we are three. Our sister Elsa also is traveling in Brazil, so cannot join us. So we will see whether we can manage thanks to our dear Sylvia, which is here. Hello, Sylvia. How are you?
Sylvia, you are on mute, my friend.
You are on mute, yes.
I can unmute it.
No, it's...
There you have it. We can hear you. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we
Oh,
can.
I couldn't unmute myself. I'm so sorry. I beg your pardon. Good evening, Charles. Good evening, Dan. Good evening, everyone who will be with us today. Once again, we are here together to discuss another special subject, another something very, very special for us. And I hope everyone will take part, ask questions, make comments. And it will be a very special day because today we're talking about the teachings of Jesus, which are extremely relevant for us at this moment in the world. So welcome and God bless. Nice to have you with
Hello,
us again,
Dan.
Dan.
Thank you
I'm
for
very
having
happy
me.
to be here again with you. Thanks for coming. How are you, Dan?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to see you guys one more time. It's always wonderful to make some time for us to think about our spiritual life, so to speak, and to talk about important topics. This one is a very important one, I think, in many different ways. I think that our official title today is Living the Gospel, Spiritist Reflections on Jesus' Teachings. And I think there's a lot for us to unpack there. So I'm excited to be here with you today and be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dan. Okay, so I think let's start. So the Gospel is the third book Allan Kardec wrote after the Spirit's book and the Medium's book, 1857, with revision 1860 and 1861 for the Medium's book, and the Gospel 1863 for first edition and 65 second edition. So, Dan, what can you tell us about basically the objective of this book? Why did Kardec write this book and entitle it The Gospel According to Spiritism? Is it really about only the gospel, or is it more than that?
I absolutely love that question. I think that is a really great way for us to frame a conversation, right? So in the Western Hemisphere, we talk about the gospel being really the work and the words of Jesus. And where do we find the gospel? We find the gospel in the Christian New Testament, right? Which are those 27 books that we find. Four of them are actually gospels. They're called gospels: Gospel of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. The other ones, there's some letters and so forth. But there has always been an interesting perspective because sometimes they contradict themselves. They have wonderful information. Now, the gospel according to Spiritism, it really is also a masterful work, a companion to the Gospels, I think, in the New Testament, in the sense that it helps us re-understand or better understand the gospel of Jesus under a more encompassing light that Spiritism brings to our perspectives. Once we begin to understand the spiritual world, reincarnation, mediumship, and all the things that Spiritism does such a great job at explaining to us, I feel like we can go back to the original Gospels and understand the words of this incredible spirit called Jesus in ways that are not only liberating, but way deeper and more profound. And I think that's something that's really needed for our days, because in many different ways, I sometimes joke around with people, and I think that people may misunderstand me when I say this, but I'm going to say this anyways. I think that Jesus has been kidnapped by our modern culture, right? I think Christians sometimes, or organized religion sometimes, have made an image of Christ, of Jesus, that is very different than the one that I have come to understand because of my understanding of Spiritism. And so I would very much love to bring Jesus into the modern world and take him away from his captors, right, that have kidnapped him to serve agendas that are not necessarily what I think Jesus was all about. So the Gospel According to Spiritism, this wonderful work that Kardec brought to us with the help of course, of the enlightened spirits, is an explanation of some key passages in the New Testament under this more encompassing light that we've talked about. When we bring reincarnation, mediumship, and all this knowledge that Spiritism has made more clear for us to these passages, we learn in a much more profound way, I think. And specifically, a lot of that book is focused on the Beatitudes, right? Blessed ourselves. So this every chapter in there sometimes is a whole explanation of one sentence. So you can see how profound and how beautiful Jesus' teachings are, even though we only explore a small section of the New Testament in this wonderful book, The Gospel According to Spiritism. But I find The Gospel According to Spiritism to be a fantastic book that we can go back to over and over again to better understand this large perspective. And hopefully when we do that, it will train us to look at the New Testament and all those wonderful teachings that Jesus left us 2,000 plus years ago in a more broad and fulfilling way. So I find this book, Charles, to be a great way into learning to see Christ differently, take him off from this perspective that we have seen before that have been given us to us by organized religion, and begin to really consider him as an incredible spirit who has come to show us how to live more fulfilling lives and point to the idea that life does not end with the death of the physical body.
Thank you, Dan. There were some questions I wanted to ask you in complement, but you answered to most of them already. Just one. So according to what you are saying, I understand that the understanding coming out of the gospel according to Spiritism is that Jesus is not God. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's how we see it for sure. Jesus is not God in our perspective. And we can tackle that in many different ways, and we can even use the words of Jesus himself in many times. This belief that God is Jesus is something that has been conflating our theological thinking for a couple of centuries now. But I think that you will find that there's more mentions in the New Testament about Jesus not being God, but being subject to God, than of him poetically saying that he's aligned with God. But for us, Spiritists that understand this in a slightly different manner, perhaps than most traditional Christians would, for us it's clear that Jesus was an incredible messenger sent by God, and what we call a perfect spirit, a spirit that has achieved a level of evolution that is really hard for us to fathom sometimes and comprehend. And he has come to show us the way so that we learn to be closer to God. And so he is not necessarily God, but he's such a high spirit, such an evolved spirit, that I understand sometimes that people may want to think that he's God, because he's so far ahead of our comprehension that it's difficult for us to really separate sometimes. I mean, it's so hard for us to even know what God is, right? That's a whole different conversation about how can we think about an entity that is beyond our ability to comprehend it, right? But anyways, from my perspective, from where I'm sitting, it becomes a little bit clearer to us that how we see that in Spiritism is not that Jesus is God, but Jesus is an incredible messenger coming from God to help us get there.
Understood. Okay, very, very, very clear. And also, I think we could mention that Jesus is not a special creature of God. he has gone through the same way as we are going to now, but a long time ago. So with all this time lag, he had the time to progress much more. But one day we will also reach that level, correct?
That is true. Sorry, I am distracted by my very cute kid running behind me here, trying to squeeze and not be in the frame so he can get his computer. David, you can just get your computer. It's okay, but
Don't need to squeeze. He shouldn't worry. No problem for us.
he's a very thoughtful young man. So I appreciate that very much. So, but sorry, can you repeat that question again, Charles? I was trying not to laugh as he army crawled behind me. There he goes.
So I was saying that Jesus is not a special creation of God. He has been created like we have been created, but a long time ago, much before us. So he had time to progress until this level of perfection that we will also reach once. For me, it will be very, very long time, but one day we will reach that level, correct?
Yes, indeed. And I think that brings us a lot of hope and a lot of aspirations, right? But it makes sense too, because I think in Spiritism, we'll begin to use our reason to see that it doesn't make sense that God would make special beings in creation. If we understand God to be kind and just and fair, then it wouldn't make sense that God would make some people better than others. We all start from the same starting place. It's just that our experiences over time, through many reincarnations, lead us to different levels of development and understanding of things. So with our perspective, what our Spiritist perspective, with these spiritual glasses, so to speak, that Spiritism gives us, we can understand that that we are all created simple and ignorant, and that through our own choices in many lifetimes, we evolve with time. Now, because we were not created at the same time, like Charles mentioned, then it also makes sense that we will develop in different speeds, right? So Jesus has been on this a lot longer than we have, we think, and has gotten to a level of evolution that is really difficult for us to understand. But absolutely, so it's also very beautiful in many different ways, because then everything that he taught us while he was here on earth is things that we are going to be able to do and understand too. And he said that in his many passages, right, in the New Testament, where he says, everything that I have done, you will be able to do as well. So there is a clear sense of he's trailblazing for us. He's telling us what our future will look like when we get to that level of development. And to get there, we really must pay attention to the idea that we are way more than meets the eye. We're not just this physical body. We don't have just this life. And I think that if you boil down his main teaching of the whole story that we hear in the New Testament, is that he was crucified and he came back to show us that life goes on after that. And I think that is really reassuring for us too, because our lives are going to go on after we leave our physical bodies behind. So Spiritism really gets us to ask, what does that mean? How will I live after this life? How should I change the way I live today, now that I know that my spirit is immortal and I will continue to have many lifetimes? And opens wonderful opportunities for us to have conversations such as this one, to try to find ways that are meaningful for us to live meaningful and fulfilling lives now, that will add not only to who we are today, to the world, but who we are going to be tomorrow.
Perfect. I think it's crystal clear. Yes, I would maybe just add that an important point here about Jesus and about the Gospels, because at the first paragraph of the introduction of the book, so really at the very beginning of the book, Kardec is clarifying that in the Gospels there are 5 different types, parts. He's quoting the events in the life of Christ, so historical part, the miracles, so he already engaged in interpretation of the religious leaders, the prophecies, then the words taken by the church on which they base their dogmas, and the 5th part is the moral teachings. And Kardec is clearly stating the first four have been object of controversies. Okay. However, the fifth one, the last one, has remained constantly inviolate. So it is really the basis, common ground where all the cults may be united, the flag under which all may gather whatever their creeds are. Okay. So I think this is also an important point. It's the title of the book is, of course, The Gospel According to Spiritism, because he takes the gospel, which was so strong in the culture of the 19th century in France, that where there was still poor information about Orient and about the other religions around the world. So that's where it comes from. But what's very important is maybe it should have been put another title, which would be the universal moral laws or moral teachings according to Spiritism, isn't it?
So much so, and I would love to hear Sylvia's perspective here too. But in the very book, right, in the Spirit's book that starts it all, we get a very clear message when we ask the spirits who is perhaps the best guide and model, and the spirits say Jesus. But they are also quick to say that he's not the only one, right? And that it also makes sense that as God cares for us, because God is not Jesus, right? God has sent us, that he would also send many different messengers over time to teach this universal moral laws that Jesus made so clear to us in many different ways. So I think that makes complete sense. And I think that is a challenge that in our world we should bear in mind, which is if you're really looking for these universal moral laws, which I find so aptly displayed by the life and teachings of Christ in its essence, I would also do well to open my eyes to different messengers of spirituality that bring those lessons to me, independent of where they come from, right? So many times we say that there's a very big Christian vein in Spiritism, but it's not limited to our perception of organized religion. And that's one of the things that we try to do away with, is to break that organized view and really go to the core, to the essence, and embrace everything out in the world that is good.
And Sylvia, please. A quick question to you. All these teachings about these moral laws, which are coming out of the gospel, that Kardec made the quotes and so on, the examples also given by Jesus when he was living here 2,000 plus years ago, are these moral laws in the book Gospel According to Spiritism?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the.
Sorry, can you hear me, Sylvia?
Oh, it's frozen. I can hear you now. You seem, it comes and goes, your voice. Sorry, I'm trying to. I'm so sorry. Can you please ask the question again? Because you disappeared for a while. Everything went frozen.
Sorry for that, Sylvia. In a very simple way, are these moral teachings that Kardec gathered in the Gospel According to Spiritism something theoretical or something that we can apply in our practical day-by-day life?
Well, I think I think that that's the whole thing. One of the important things I find with Spiritism and the Spirit's book, the Gospel According to Spiritism, is that it's explained to us many things that maybe in the Gospel is not so clear. So it does, and they bring the explanations for that. I think every single thing that Jesus said, we can apply to our lives every single day. I can't think of anything that is not relevant. And I think it's very, very important to understand the lessons because, as pointed out, Jesus is not God. Like some people said, God is divided. But the Spirit teaches us that actually the first question of the Spirit's book, in which Kardec asked, "What is God?" And the answer was, "God is the supreme intelligence of the universe, the first cause of all things." So this shows that God is not divisible, is not a woman, is not a man, is not a creature, is an intelligence, pervades the whole of the universe. And Jesus, according to the book Genesis, which one of the book of the codification, he's an emissary of God. So everything he taught, and is very much, I think, it's very accessible to everyone. Either if you are a simple person, if you're a very educated person, and everyone can understand it very clear, unless they don't want to, because I think you can put the whole of the teachings, the whole body of teachings of Jesus into the phrase that he said himself: love God and love your neighbor as yourself, and do to others as you would they do to you. And I think this is, and he says, this is all the prophets. So Jesus himself said that this closes everything that the prophets that came before taught. And it's because if we could do that, if we could have the respect, we could give respect to other person that we want to receive, if we could have the kindness that we want to receive, I think the world would be very peaceful, would be very, very easy. And I think because sometimes things can be very difficult, and they make things into a very a lot of different words, and it's very, very simple, it's very accessible. I think many of the lessons of the gospel that we can see, and it's interesting when we go there, because some of the people that were considered the worst people were the ones that Jesus always welcomed. And I find that, a lot of in our society, we are so judgmental sometimes. We are so, filled with our own truth that we forget. And again and again, if you think about the story, because actually Jesus was an incredible storyteller. He taught everything through the stories, and that everyone could relate to. When he talks about the Samaritan, I mean, if you go to the learning, the Samaritans were despised people. They had these differences with a religious difference with the people from Jerusalem, and they were despised. And yet, one of the greatest examples of charity Jesus got from the Samaritan, when he says the priest passed by, the Levite passed by, and there was this man who had been attacked, was half dead, being robbed, and they just went by because, oh no, we can't touch that. I don't know who he is. He's not as good as we are. And the Samaritan stopped, took care of him, put him in his horse, took him to the hotel, took care of him, and when he left, he gave the money. He paid the innkeeper and said, take care of him while I'm away, and anything that you spend more, I will give to you when I come back. And, then again, another, it was the Roman soldier. I mean, we can't imagine, because sometimes in modern times, we cannot imagine how the things were, Romans as well. They were the invading people. They were dominating everything, and they were hated. And Jesus gives the Roman soldier as a symbol of faith, because the soldier comes, the centurion comes to Jesus and said, I have this servant, which I love very much, and he's very ill. And Jesus said, I go and heal him. And the man says to him, no, I'm not worthy that you come to my house. But if you say the word, he will be healed. And for that, it's quite a surprise for Jesus that someone who completely, is hated and detested by everyone, he says, no, if you say the word, he had such a faith. So he gives an example of faith. And I think also the woman, when they bring the adulterous woman to Jesus, and they're tempting him, and they are constantly tempting him and challenging him and say, the law says that this has to happen to her. And what did you say? And he dismissed them, and they keep insisting. And then with one phrase, he said to them, he among you have no sin, be the first to stone her. And everybody just laughed, because what he did, he brought them to their own conscience. And that is very, very important, because he teaches us to have faith, no matter what other people think, to not to judge anyone, because we don't know what is behind everything. Only God knows what's behind every action. And to to be charitable to whoever it is, and even sometimes when you're not going to be receive anything back. And I think this has the basis of Christianity as Jesus taught, and that's why it has survived the Inquisition, the persecution, the invasions, or trying to destroy other religions, trying to destroy Christianity. But the purity of it is the purity, because Jesus, as an ambassador, as the emissary of God, he was bringing this. So no matter what they do, this will never be destroyed. And I personally find lately that I don't know, my opinion, maybe you're totally wrong, don't think, but we are living very much an era of the Antichrist. No other religion has such attacks as we see in Christianity. We've seen lately people putting Jesus in uniforms of demons, as if he was a horrible soldier of hate, which he wasn't. Then you see him in different figures because he belongs somewhere else. Everyone is trying to get hold of him. But the purity of his message is beyond, I think, is like something that Dan was saying, is almost beyond our understanding. And it is beyond our understanding, because, and I think a point that I find very interesting, that Spiritism teaches us that Jesus is actually the governor of our planet. He is responsible for all of our lives. And this started when this planet was beginning to form, the solar system was beginning to form. And to him, we know there are other planets as well, but the Earth is his responsibility. And when you think that the Earth started about 4.6 billion years ago, Jesus was already a Christic spirit. He was already one of the elect, those spirits who know God. We cannot imagine, how he must be now. And yet his message is accessible, even though he's this incredible spirit of light and the spirits who know God. His message is for every day. Sometimes sometimes I'm saying, I'm making a comment about something, and then I think, no, Jesus says not to judge anyone. I don't know them. I don't know their hearts. So we think about those things. The message is there, is accessible to us. And it's very interesting, because I'm just reading as well this book for Joanna de Angelis, Jesus at the present time. And she talks about the world as it is now, and what the influence of Jesus' teachings has as a doctor, as a psychologist, as he knew the heart of man. He knew what we are thinking. So all the answers that he gave, and even sometimes in traps, because they were constantly trying to trap him, with the coin, who do we pay the tax to, which was a big issue as well at the time. And he said, what's the image? And he said, this give it to Caesar and give it to God. All those things are still alive now in a thing that he taught us is relevant to our day-to-day lives. I can't imagine, I cannot imagine. I pray and thank him every day for so many wonderful things that I have, and some of the difficulties that I have as well, because that's how we learn. So I think it's a very long-winded answer, but I think he's everything. For me, Jesus is everything. He's the one I go to when I'm sad. He's the one I go to thank him when I'm happy. He's relevant to everyone if we just see the purity of his thoughts, and what he taught us. And he's ever present in our lives as well. Because I think, as Dan said as well, he came back to say, I'm not dead, I'm alive. And he lives in us, I think, So that's what I think.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I think it's really a lot of emotion we can feel into your words through this admiration of Jesus, not mostly because of the teaching and the example he gave. That's really absolutely outstanding. I mean, it's guided model, question 625. You told Dan Assisi. So it's really we know which route, which direction to go, even if the way is still quite long to get there. But we know at least which direction it is. But Dan, coming back to you, do you have some practical examples of day by day, whether with you or people where the gospel is really bringing a lot of help in order to put the life in order, or to solve the difficulties, to overcome the difficulties we have in life?
Ooh, there's so many. And I think that is the challenge of our times is, can we break the veil and pierce this patina of history that we have given to these books about Jesus, like the New Testament, that we think that they're so old and they are not relatable. I find the stories to be incredibly relatable and very pragmatic and practical for us, if only we know how to see them with modern eyes, right? So I think that there's wonderful stories in there. I think that Sylvia alluded to something that is really beautiful for our times today when we're struggling to deal with people. Jesus went everywhere and talked to everyone. Even his followers, for instance, were, the 12 apostles. They had different backgrounds. We had fishermen. We had tax collectors that used to work for the occupying forces. They were not very well liked at all, right? We had young people. We had older people. And of course, because of the culture of the time, we read mainly about men, but we also see Christ Jesus surrounded by many powerful and impactful women to whom he talked on a regular basis, whether it's Mary of Magdalene, where is Mary, his mother, and so many different, Martha, Ruth, there's so many different others. So I think that one wonderful message that I see in his teachings is that he related to everybody in many different ways. And I think that's a lesson that stays with us, right? I, for instance, think that even in those times, he was a very powerful figure in cutting across the perceived limitations of our social customs to tell us that everybody belongs, because he talked to everybody. He talked to the Jewish, to the Romans. I am reminded, for instance, a beautiful story. One of my favorite stories in the gospel, which is in the Gospel of John, is the woman at the well of Jacob's well. But I don't think you remember that when he goes over there and he asks the woman to give him water. And it's a big shock for her. First of all, because men would not normally talk to unassociated women that they did not know, right? And also because she was a Samaritan, and there was this difference between being a Jew and talking to a Samaritan. So he's breaking all kinds of protocols on that conversation when he asks for water, as is to show us that we should also break this sense of social status, society, perception, gender inequality, and just embrace everybody else as the immortal spirit that they are. And I think that is, for instance, a very pragmatic lesson that we see in our lives nowadays. We should be engaging with everybody. We should keep a diverse group of people that think differently than us, that have different experiences than us in our lives. And we should engage in conversations that really address not only the social stuff that we see, but our future as an immortal spirit, because he always spoke to the immortal spirit in us. He was very kind. He had a lot of tolerance to other people. And I think that is really something important for us to see his actions and hold on to his actions and not what other Christians tell us that we should do, right? We should go back to the source and see how he behaved. And so in many different ways, we see wonderful stories. We see stories of him talking to people. We see stories of him feeding people when they were hungry. We see stories of him taking his time to heal people that were painful, to talk to people who were abandoned, to talk to people who would not be accepted. And I wonder if there is not lots of lessons for us to gather for our daily living about the way he lived. Can we live like he lived, or at least a little bit closer to that idea, right? And I think that is a powerful reminder for us that there's a lot more in there that we could get at than we do nowadays, if we're able to have eyes to see, like he would say, right? But let me turn it over to you, Charles, and say, what do you think is most impactful or most interesting in the life of Jesus, or also perhaps even in the Gospels explained by according to Spiritism?
I mean, indeed, there are a lot of. I have been educated Christian, Catholic, but really, when I was starting reading the Gospel, I did not have the conditions to understand. And then when I went then to the priest or whoever, can you please explain me better what this is? He often gave me explanation that I couldn't understand either. So basically, I turned somehow indifferent, saying, "Okay, well, it's something strange. They believe in it. They are apparently doing good with all that. So why not? But for me, it really doesn't answer to my fundamental questions." And really, when I read the Gospel according to Spiritism, there really I could understood. I could understand who Jesus was, because as per the Catholic teaching, the Trinity is you have the Father, the Son, and the Sanctus Spirit. So for me, it was something absolutely ununderstandable. And Kardec brought it so clearly, all these things which were wrong interpreted or interpreted in a really unlogical and hardly understandable way, were brought in such a simple manner. So that was really what was helping me a lot. And the fact also to see that this constant relation between the teachings that Jesus brought and his own application, giving the example, leading by example of the teaching he brought, that was also something that I could not perceive from the Catholic education. So I would even say nowadays I'm more Christian than I was when I was Catholic, because I can understand much better all these teachings. And there is another example. I when I first read the Spirit's book, I thought, okay, spirits are existing. I have a soul. the soul will survive after the death. It can communicate with the living. But the reincarnation, shall the soul reincarnate? How can that be? So another complicated question. And reading the Gospel according to Spiritism with a correct interpretation of some of the teachings Jesus brought, showing clearly that he was talking very clearly about the reincarnation itself in several episodes. So there is a whole chapter in the Gospel according to Spiritism about this. Nobody can reach kingdom of my Father without being born again. And there very clearly we can see several parts of the gospel which are clearly where Jesus was clearly mentioning the law of reincarnation as being a truth. So I had hard time to understand, but why did do the Pope and all these bishops and whatever, why don't they teach about the reincarnation? And then, okay, resurrection, understanding a little bit better the history, this concile of Constantinople and Niceo, where they shifted this teaching away, replacing it through the resurrection, which is also something which scientifically has absolutely no means. Reconstitution of the physical body, atom by atom. I mean, okay. So it's really something which brings the clear, logical, rational, philosophical interpretation of this teaching of Jesus and enabling us to understand it as it is written on the cover page of the gospel itself. Unshakable faith is only the one who can see face to face the reason at every epoch of the humanity. So this shift between the blind faith to the reasoned or the rational faith. I have a lot of admiration of the people who can have a faith just by reading, okay, you have to believe, so I believe, full stop, even if I don't understand. I'm not capable of that. I need to understand something before believing into it, or believing unshakably into it. And this is really what this book brought to me. Then, of course, I would say also all these teachings that we are that are useful for our day by day life. I mean, he's bringing teachings like, okay, do unto the other what you would like the other to do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself, enabling us to understand so many things. How can I love? How can someone who does not have self-esteem love the neighbor? This is not what Jesus asked. Jesus asked, love your neighbor as yourself. So if you don't love yourself, if you don't have this self-esteem, you hardly can love your neighbor. So, but as soon as you love yourself, you have to love your neighbor as well. Because when I love a lot myself and I don't love my neighbor, I'm selfish. So all these things are so crystal clear that at the end you think about, yes, I think he's really fundamentally right. So let's work on this, take the hammer and try to take out all this rubbish that we still bring from our ignorance from the past and replace it by these values in a autonomous, conscient, using our free will, and not being obliged to or looking for a recompense. So in a true disinterested way. So that's really what this book brought. And there is also something I would like to mention quickly. At the end of the book, the last two chapters are about prayers. So one chapter, 27, if I remember well, explaining how prayer works, how our thoughts are so important. On the earth, we cannot measure our thoughts. There is no apparatus, that physical apparatus, material apparatus that is capable of measuring the thought we have. So this explains what some people are very nice, very kind, very gentle, but their thoughts are really opposite. So it's hypocrisy. But reading this section, we understand that in the spiritual world, it's not like that at all, because our thoughts are building what we are in the spiritual world. Our spiritual body, our thoughts are directly readable by the other spirits, in particular the ones which are more advanced than ourselves. So it's also a fundamental teaching. We will have to go to that situation. So hypocrisy, it will be a shame for us. It will be very hard in front of our conscience to we are somehow naked. We cannot hide anything anymore. So let's train from now to be like this, to having nothing to hide, to be open, direct, fair, without second hidden intention and whatever. And the last one, maybe before giving back to Sylvia, is about money. The money, the material stuff. So it's a tool. We are incarnated in a material world, so we need to eat, we need to have a home, we need to protect us, and so on. So we need to work to gain that. Okay, but the day we will die, we will not take a single penny and a single atom of our physical body with us. We go back, leaving all these material things here. So this enables also to understand that all this material stuff and the money shall be used for what we will keep when we will go back, and it will come sooner or later, which is our soul. So we really shall use the opportunity of the incarnation for the evolution of our soul. And when I look what's happening on the world, you have people, they are encouraging wars to dominate, to have power, to take what is from the other. It's a lot of people dying just because he wants to impose his way of seeing, or he wants to take the richness of the other one. I mean, okay, we had that in the Middle Age, we had that in the 19th century, this colonialist approach and so on. But today, how can that still be like this? What are we waiting to react against those things and say, stop, enough, let's go to another model for our humanity, because this one is definitively not sustainable. And this, you see, this type of reasoning is based on this basic moral, universal moral teaching, which Jesus brought, which were wrongly interpreted, wrongly understood, and which are now dramatically clarified in this book of Kardec. What do you think, Sylvia? Right or wrong?
Yes, it's there's so much. I just think that when I first started studying about Spiritism, in chapter 12 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, that he talks about part of the Sermon on the Mount, love your enemies. And I think this for me was one of the most interesting, because he says, if the principle of charity is to love one's neighbor, then to love your enemies is sublime. But then he goes on to explain about that for the word love in this sense, that we cannot love an enemy. We cannot love someone who creates the terrible, makes you suffer, or that you cannot trust, someone that, done something really bad. But what he says, you need to, you cannot love them, because he says physically is not possible for us in the stage of development that we see, moral development. That's what I mean. He says here, you cannot show friendship to someone that is going to abuse the situation. But then he says that it is the diversity of those feelings. So we should really, we cannot love them as we would love a friend, but we do not wish them any harm. We do not, curse them or wish them something bad, or if something bad happens to them, we don't feel happy, pleased that happened. So I think for me, it was one of the most important lessons, I think, that I learned in this book, in the Gospel According to Spiritism, because he gives us this explanation that physically is not possible to love an enemy, but you don't need to provoke something nasty. You don't need to wish them harm. You don't be happy if there's something happens to them. And I think they say something that I find very important, to leave the door open for reconciliation. If the person comes and, you can. But on the other hand, he also says, if they abuse it, then it is okay that you move away from this person. And I find that very, very important here in the Gospel According to Spiritism, because sometimes, say, no, you have to love your enemy, and you can't love your enemy. It's impossible. And the way he says it's physically impossible. But not wishing them any harm is already a step forward, I think. And eventually we will, because, we progress. But I also think that in chapter 6, please, everyone who's listening to us, get hold of the gospel and read it. You will love it. For me, it's something that I always go back to. Actually, I have my gospel here, and you can see it's falling apart. It's all kind of, stuck with clips and everything. But because I read it all the time. And something I always go to, and Christ the Consoler, when Jesus says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke unto you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." I always go to this. I find it such a consolation, when something happens, and especially living away from your family, and, you're quite alone sometimes when difficult things happen. And I always go to this, and I feel consoled, and I feel comforted, and I feel supported. I always go to this whenever I have. But I think one thing that is very important as well for us as Spiritists, here they say is the promised consoler. In John's chapter 14, 15, and 17, and 26, Jesus said, "If you love me, keep my commandments, and I'll pray the Father, and he shall give you another comforter that may abide with you forever, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it seeth him not, neither knoweth him, but he shall know him, and he dwelleth with you and shall be in you. But the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things, and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I had said unto you." So this is Spiritism, was already promised by Jesus, that this knowledge of the Spirit would come to us at a later date. I find this as well very comforting. Especially, there is still quite some ignorance about what Spiritism is and everything. And this is a comfort that, we have. This knowledge is there for us to hold on to and to sustain us in difficult times. What do you two think?
Dan?
So there's so much that we can talk about when it comes to Christ, right? To Jesus in general. And what Sylvia shared is just a tiny little piece of it. I think what Charles said also speaks to the soul of it. But at the end of the day, it's also because I think we're coming across our time is feels like Jesus is such a misunderstood figure in our times, that we have let others define what Jesus is to us, because we've heard from others about what they think Jesus is and what they think Jesus' teachings are. And I think the invitation of the moment is for us to try to find for ourselves what his life was like and what his teachings are like. The Gospels explained by Spiritism is a great way of thinking about those teachings in a broader sense. But if you want to go back to the source of the New Testament and dive into that, I think that it will be wonderful. Not only for us to think about what he has done, but how he lived. I think by example, and it's perhaps one big takeaway that I take when I have taken the time to study his life a little bit more, is that not only he spoke about things, but he also did them. And I think that is very telling for us, which leads me to an overwhelming question and a fundamental one too, that oftentimes I ask even of myself, which if we want to be more Christian, we have to be more Christ-like. And to be Christ-like, we need to understand his life and his proposal for life and his perspective. And that's one of spirituality, one of immortality of the soul, and thinking about ways in which we live in this world, but we're not of this world. That we're here temporarily as part of our evolution, but that's not who we are in our entirety. So to dive deeper into his teachings, to what he spoke about and how he spoke about them, and what he promised us and what he told us was going to happen and how he suggested we live, are incredible things to do, and enough for a learning for not only one lifetime, for many lifetimes. So I think it's fascinating that we can engage with this, and hopefully people will feel inspired to find their own Jesus, their own interpretation of Jesus through their readings, and not just through other people say. And I think that is a lesson that when I brought that into my life, transformed me, transformed the way I think about spirituality, about life, about the figure of Jesus. And I hope that sincerely we can continue to have conversations such as this one that lets us peek behind the curtain of a Jesus that was kidnapped by others for different agendas, and that we can make our own if we only take the time to get to know Jesus and his teachings.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And really, again, I stress that these moral laws that Jesus taught and gave example are universal, because we find them wherever. We find them in the Quran, we find them in the Vedas, we find them in Buddhism, we find them in Taoism. Not exactly the same word by word, but exactly the same idea, the same principle. And this is also something I had the huge opportunity to participate to the Millennium World Peace Summit in year 2000 in UN in headquarters in New York, where several hundreds of leaders of spiritual movements and religions were gathered, and all them signed a commitment with some excerpts, very limited, but on which everybody agrees. So I think this is also a very positive message that on the essential things, everybody agrees. Most of the people agree. What makes differences is, okay, I have to pray like this, the other one prays like that. One is with white clothes, the other one is with black clothes, and so on and so on and so on. But on the essential things, these universal moral laws, we all agree. So Kardec was fundamentally right, saying this is really the ground on which we all can unite, join our efforts, and act and work for peace, for having a sustainable future for the humanity on this planet. Okay, so I think we have seen most of the. We are already reaching the end. Unfortunately, Stephen could not join. He must be busy in another meeting for his work. So I have not the tool here to share screen, or and even I don't have the slides of the announcements. The only announcement I can do is next week we will have the next book, which is the fourth one of Kardec, which is entitled Heaven and Hell. So we will talk about life after death, justice, consolation, and spiritual progress. And our special guest next week will be our dear friend Munir Guariba, that came from time to time already for this to this spiritual light mission. It's one book which is not so known, but it is really excellent. I would even say one of the best ones that helped me also a lot in my journey until now in this current incarnation. Okay, Sylvia, some final words?
Okay, just thanking you two and everyone who's with us, talking about the gospel according to Spiritism, and I recommend that everyone, you can get it for free, the internet and everything. Go and read it because it can be very, very consoling and sustaining in difficult times, and give you a lot of explanations about life and how we can be, and the moral laws, as you said, brings us closer to each other and to God. So have a lovely Easter. May God bless you all. And these special days that's coming up. So have a blessed Easter, and may God bless us all.
Thank you, Sylvia. And thank you also to Realia, which was with us, to Lori Mortarulo, to Pat K, to Lou VM, to Ahmed Abad. Thanks a lot for joining us. Again, happy Easter to everyone. Easter is a special period also where a lot of things happened historically with Jesus. Okay, it will be a pleasure to meet you again next week. And Dan, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being with us today. All the best.
Have a great week.
Let's see if Ivan is capturing, because only he, I think, can stop the. Yes,
Okay.
we can put ourselves out of.
Okay. Bye, Charles.
Bye bye.
Bye,
Yes,
everyone.
all the best. God
Good
bless.
night. God bless.